Welcome everybody to the live stream. I literally, for those of you that were in the last one, I literally had to go get my water because Dr. Bruce and I, who had a great conversation, Mike had me thinking about getting hydrated. So that's what took me a little bit of time. We got Jesse J. Anderson joining me here in just a moment. We're going to be talking about the book, his book, Extra Focus. The Quick Start Guide to Adult ADHD, which has garnered a bunch of praise from folks like Derek Sivers and Jessica McCabe, who's been on Jessica's been on the show before. I know that Derek has. Basically, what I love about this is the dedication is to everyone who was told they were just lazy. This is going to be a conversation where we kind of debunk all that. Good to see Michael and Janet joining us in the chat. Janet was just in the previous live stream too. So, and if you're watching on LinkedIn, Jesse will be here in just a minute. We will, if you have any thoughts or comments, I can't monitor necessarily what's going on there, but I'll be happy to share my thoughts and insights after the fact. And for those that are watching live on YouTube right now, you may just have some of your stuff come into the conversation as well. Speaking of conversation, let's get ready. Here, joining me right now is Jesse J. Anderson. Jesse, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited. We're here to make it happen.
We are. So the way this normally goes, and for those that have watched the kind of raw interview live streams, is we kind of just put together the podcast episode after the fact. So the bio, all that stuff doesn't happen until after the fact. And the one thing that we do get you to do though, Jesse, is we get you to introduce yourself. Okay, we didn't get Dr. Bruce to do that, but he's introduced himself before, so I can just cut that from a previous episode and throw that in. The magic of editing. But I've never had you on the show before, and I'm surprised. Like, why is that? Can you tell me? I'm just kidding. You have no idea. We've hung out before. We actually. How was you were in Boise just recently for the KIT conference? How was it?
Yeah, I was just there last week. It was epic. I got to do like back-to-back conferences because Jay Klaus, he has the lab community, and they did sort of like a little mini pre-conference conference. And so I was in Boise like all week.
Wow.
And both of them were amazing. So
awesome.
I had a really good time there.
Yeah, hopefully I'll be able to make it back next year just with the book and all that stuff. And last summer at home with my daughter before she heads and lives elsewhere for the rest of her university career. So kind of weighing all those things and we get to chat like this too. So but I'm looking forward to actually getting out, be able to hang out with you again in person. You're not that far from me either. I mean, technically we're not terribly far. We've just got this imaginary line, I believe, that's separating us, right? If I recall.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So Jesse, I'm going to get you to introduce yourself before we get into things. Again, your line, you've got a basic line, which is hi, state your name, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. And then we just go into it. All right. So nice. I'll count you in, and then we just go into it. And again, if you have any questions, those of you that are in the YouTube chat, all members of the Time Crafting Trust community, feel free to, and we may pop them up on the screen as we go. I may take some of them and ask them during the conversation. But let's get started. So Jesse, I'm going to count you in. Again, it's hi, I'm, state your name, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hey, I'm Jesse J. Anderson, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Jesse, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today for this podcast episode. Your first appearance on A Productive Conversation. Like I said before we hit record during the preamble, I don't know how this didn't happen sooner. I mean, we've known each other for a while, but maybe my attention got diverted.
That might have been it.
That might have been it. We've got a bunch of people that are part of the community that are in the chat. You may hear, by the way, those that are listening to the episode or even watching the polished live episode on YouTube, some of the questions that come up from members of my community. I'll touch on in the show notes how people can become members of the community. But I want to stay focused, extra focused, in fact, during our conversation today, because that's what we're going to be talking about. Jesse's book, Extra Focus, and I got to bring it closer to my head. Extra Focus, the Quick Start Guide to Adult ADHD. Jesse, I'm not going to ask you why you wrote this book. I'm going to ask you how long it took you to write this book, considering that you have is the challenge of adult ADHD probably the best way to put it, or is there a best way to put it?
It's hard. I don't know if there is a best way to put it. Like some people really want to lean towards saying it's just a brain difference and things like that. But the reality is, in a society that we live in that's very neurotypical focused, it is a challenge having ADHD. So I'm not too picky about it. I do think there are challenges to having ADHD, and so and definitely writing a book being one of those. So
Well, I was going to say, because you don't get that instant dopamine hit that you would from like a social media post or even writing a blog post or an email newsletter. We were just chatting before we hit record about the conference that we actually managed to meet each other in person at once, which is the KIT conference, the Craft and Commerce event in Boise. So how did you keep yourself deprived of that dopamine as you went through the process of, because it's not a short book. It's not like it's a novella or anything. It's got a lot of stuff going on.
yeah, so I think going into it, I told the lie to myself, or because I had, excuse me, I had done a lot of writing for Ship 30 for 30,
Mm-hmm.
which was like the writing challenge I was a part of, where you
Yeah.
write every day for 30 days and then you post it. And kind of like you're saying, you get a lot of that immediate dopamine. You're getting feedback immediately the day that you write it. And so after having done that, I had a lot of words written, and I was like, "Oh, writing a book, this is going to be easy." Just kind of go through and organize these words a little bit, and poof, there you have a book. As you probably well know, that is not the case. Writing a book is quite a unique and different challenge than writing just kind of a bunch of little mini essays and stringing them together. So yeah, it was really hard at the beginning. I was excited when I started, and I was doing it, just like writing every day. And then I remember one day realizing, having the but like, wait, has it been 3 months since I even opened, like even looked at any of the stuff I've been writing? It like so much time had passed and I didn't even realize it. It was wild. And so that's basically when I had to strategize. I was like, okay, I need to figure out a way that is going to help me keep doing this. Because what I'm trying to do right now, which is just like go off of being excited about writing a book, that's not going to work anymore. That worked for the first couple of months, and that is over. Now we need some strategies. So actually, I'll just say like the two big things that helped the most. One, I self-published, so I didn't have an editor or anything like that. So I didn't have anyone like bang on the door for giving me deadlines. So I actually hired an editor to give me deadlines, and my editor was great. One of the things he said was like, "Hey, you're paying me, so I can't enforce any of these deadlines. But just so you know, like if you don't have," he would basically say, "if you don't have your next manuscript version to me by this date, then that means you're going to get bumped to the end of the line, and it's going to be like 3 more months before I can look at it."
Yeah. It's like when
And
Charlie
so,
Charlie Gilkey said in a previous podcast episode that one of the ways he got someone to get through what he calls the thrash, that messy middle, is he said, if you don't finish by this deadline, um, the check that you gave me that's going to go to an organization that you definitely don't approve of will get that check. So you have to have it by this date. So there's lots of interesting motivational tactics. By the way, I want to share this with you because right out of the gate, look at what Michael Porter has said about your book.
oh,
Good
nice.
book
Thank you,
company.
Michael.
And he's trying to stay ultra focused right now, extra focused rather, because he only used four words to describe. I'm sure he could go. I know Michael well enough that he could talk about it at more length, but he's like, I want to stay focused on this conversation because
I love it. I'm trying. Speaking, I'm trying really hard to ignore the little chat. I see the red dot there, and I know that's going to be no good if I open that up. I'll love to look at it later, but right now that's gonna kill me if I
I'll
open
just
that up.
bring up the stuff that's important onto as overlays to kind of, because and actually anyone who's listened to the show before knows that I don't really go in sequential order with this, which is again not unusual for someone who has, I don't have ADHD, but sequencing is one of those things that has to be created and cultivated with someone who has attention challenges, as opposed to just, okay, well, this is how this is just the progress map that I'm going to follow. One of the things that you talk about is the clockless mind, which I love. And, you hear the term time blindness. I've heard that before, and so on and so forth. And obviously there's certain situations where you can't use time blindness I've seen videos. I think there was a TikTok video that went viral a few years ago that said, I'm time blind. And you had some people saying, yeah, I totally get it. And then someone said, yeah, but if you're an airline pilot, I don't care. Like, that's not a job for you. You know what I mean? Like there's certain, and so you got both sides of the spectrum. But what I love about when you realize that, I think more people need to understand that in this space when they're trying to manage things like time, it ADHD folks, to me, and you mentioned right out of the gate, have to manage their attention. Time is not necessarily something that they can use, or even they seem to get that they can't manage time. Is that something that you would agree with, or that you've discovered over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with time is because like growing up and hearing people talk about, I don't know, time and all the things you're just sort of learning, you don't realize that you're perceiving things different from other people.
Right.
And so you're hearing what people are saying about time or attention or whatever it is. And, or, just like with color, like people that are colorblind oftentimes don't find out they're colorblind until way later in life when something sort of sparks it. Because when they looked at, I don't know the specifics, but when they looked at some color and it was kind of a grayish and people said, oh, that's bright green, they're like, oh, okay, I guess that's bright green, and don't have that connection later. They're like, oh, I'm seeing like a really dullified version of what most people are seeing for that color.
Right.
And that really is, I feel like, my perception of time. I thought everyone had a similar perception of time that I did, which is basically not feeling time move at all. Like I don't feel time. I could, if I'm focused on something, I could like, if I get like 10, 15 minutes into it, and then you ask me how long time has passed, if I don't have context clues, like weather changing or like alarms that had gone off my watch or anything that kind of clues me into how much time has passed, I don't know if it's been 15 minutes or 5 hours. I just like cannot feel that passing of time. And that is pretty consistent for people with ADHD. Where neurotypical people, I think it varies obviously, but my wife is like, I could ask her anytime, any day, hey, what time is it right now? And she's usually going to be within like 3 minutes. It's uncanny. And that is just like so not me at all.
Do you find that you are stuck again, like you find yourself oscillating, that's better, between friction and flow more than say, like, so for example, for me, moments of flow and moments of friction are, they're not perpetual, like, oh, I'm in flow now, or oh, I'm in this, like, and again, when you're in flow, time is flows, like you don't even pay attention to it, and they're like, oh my goodness, like, having a conversation with you and having conversations sometimes it flies by, and in really engaging conversations that happens. And then there's friction, which I can recognize that, and I can recognize flow. Do you find that there's an oscillation where it's either you're in flow or you're friction, like it's either flow or friction? Do you find that?
Yeah, I kind of feel there's actually a really great like comic artist in the ADHD community is Danny Donovan, and she's one of the comics she's done shows like light switches and has sort of like light switches associated with different aspects of living with ADHD, and that's really what I feel like. Either I am like in that hyper focused 1000%, and I'm just like doing the stuff in it, and like I'm a train, just like flying down the tracks at like I don't know how fast trains go, but like at top speed, just like nothing's gonna stop me when I'm in that hyper focus. But then when that light switch, when it flips to the other side, it's the 100% the opposite, and I cannot, like, crossing that barrier is so hard, getting from one to the other, and it feels like I kind of feel like I'm either doing the best work of my life or I am completely worthless and can't get started. I just like cannot push myself off. A lot of it is like couch lock, that where you get like stuck. You're sitting on the couch and you should get up and do something, and that movement is just so difficult to get back into any sort of forward productivity motion, whatever.
You could do anything, and that's what keeps you like, I could do anything. Well, that seems like a lot.
Exactly. I just posted like the other day, someone tells me, hey, the possibilities are endless. And that kind of sets off panic mode a little bit. Like, oh no, the possibilities are endless. That's too much, because now I'm trying to think of all the possibilities, all the things that I could do.
Tim calls what he experiences, he says friction versus flow. He calls it personal viscosity, which I kind of like.
Nice.
that idea of just like making your way through it.
Solid.
And of course, Jackie, I like this neuro spicy. I do like that as well. That's really, really cool.
Yeah, I love how people have really like claimed it and really kind of found their own labels. I have a friend, He likes to use the word just radiant brain. He's like, I have a
Hmm.
radiant brain, which I think that's kind of cool too. And yeah, neurospicy is a big one that people are really loving. So yeah, I think it's fun. Own it, claim it, make it your own.
I want to talk about the four C's because we want to get into some strategies for those. And by the way, I think it's really important to note that even if you are not someone who has the challenges of ADHD, these strategies will work for you also.
Yeah.
Like I was going through the book, I'm like, well, this will work for me. This will work for and so it's interesting because when you're niching into this area, which I mean, this, for example, this live stream that we're doing for my community, first and foremost, before we release the podcast episode, which you may or may not be listening to the podcast as it's released, or maybe you're checking it out in advance. This got a lot of notice. And ADHD, not only people are embracing it, but people are more curious about it. They want to navigate it, but also I think it's really important to note, as I said, that even if you don't have ADHD tendencies or the challenges that can present itself with it, or have gone through the testing or anything like that, this kind of stuff can help you. The four C's template I really like out of the gate. So can we talk about the idea of captivate, create, compete, and complete? Because I think that the mnemonics, anything that you can latch your attention onto that's got meaning behind it, I think can pull you out of that friction and into flow. So can we touch on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I first heard of sort of the concept of different sort of motivation from a doctor, Dr. William Dodson, who's kind of big in the ADHD space.
Mm-hmm.
He's done a lot of like really brilliant things for the ADHD community. But one of the things he talks about is the idea that most people, like neurotypical people, are motivated primarily by importance, rewards, and consequences. And you kind of see that everywhere when you're looking at like, you're looking at the latest like productivity apps or to-do apps. A lot of the time what those are trying to do is highlight what the important things are. They're trying to bring those to the surface, and so you're not missing things that are important,
Mm-hmm.
which makes sense. Like I totally get that. That makes sense of how those apps should work. But the problem is when you have ADHD, that importance isn't actually motivating.
Right.
Seeing that something is really important doesn't give me any amount of like internal like power to do that thing, which can be really frustrating because you know that something is super important and you just can't get yourself to do it, because it just feels like there's this barrier there. And so the idea that he proposes is that that is like kind of an importance based nervous system, and people with ADHD have an interest based nervous system. And so I kind of took his ideas and yeah, gave it that wrapper of the four C's that I could remember and recall whenever I was like stuck, like when I was saying before, the couch lock. So
Mm-hmm.
those four C's, you mentioned them, but captivate, create, compete, and complete. And the four of those, basically, I'll go through each one. So captivate is all about making tasks like interesting. So when I'm interested in something, I've got no problem getting motivated to do it. Like when I actually first heard about ADHD, or my wife had mentioned it to me as something I might have, I said, like, no, there's no way I have ADHD because I have no problem focusing on things that are interesting to me. Which is once you learn more about ADHD, as I did, is
Mm-hmm.
hilarious because, like, yeah, that's ADHD. It's like really easy to get motivated for the things that are interesting. And so when I'm doing like a hobby, when I get really interested in some like side hobby, like I was into like doing modular synth music stuff for a while, which was really fun. And you couldn't stop me from doing that stuff. I was so into it and motivated. So that's captivate. The
Okay.
second one, create.
Mm-hmm.
That one's all about creativity and novelty. So whenever things are new, that means they're like a source of dopamine, and that's really exciting to the ADHD brain. And which is why a lot of people with ADHD get pulled into like doing artistic endeavors, like doing painting or things like that, things where they can really express their creativity. That they kind of naturally find themselves there because it's so easy to get motivated to do that sort of
And
stuff.
novelty too, right? Like
Yes.
anything that's new
Yeah.
and shiny. Yeah.
Yeah, the new and shiny. Oh man, that is motivating for me, which is why I love downloading like new apps, the new
Yeah.
productivity app that I want to try out or whatever it is, because that is motivating for me. A lot of times I end up using all that motivation setting up the app and then I never actually put it into practice. But that's something to learn from of like, okay, this does draw me into that forward movement where I get kind of inertia going. So how can I use that? That's a thing to sort of consider. So the third C is compete. And this one is competition or challenge. And the example I like to use for this is I remember back in school going into a classroom and the teacher putting like a problem up on the board and saying, hey, no one in the last like 2 semesters was able to solve this. And suddenly, like, I don't care about anything else I do in that class. All I'm doing is focusing on that problem, that challenge.
Yeah.
Suddenly, I'm really strongly motivated to get that challenge. And it can be tricky. That I think the challenge is kind of the trickiest one, because if it's too challenging, then I'll just shut down completely. Or if it becomes the opposite, if it's not challenging enough, same thing, I like shut down, which is why like in school I didn't do any homework because I just couldn't. It was so not challenging. It was so boring that I couldn't get myself to do it. But when I had a teacher that gave me like challenging creative problems in math class, that I had no problem doing that. That was exciting. That was fun for my brain to do. So that's captivate, create, and compete. And then the last one is complete. And this one I think is probably the most obvious for people with ADHD. And this is all about like the due dates and the deadlines, like we were talking about with the book. It's the urgency. When things are urgent, I have no problem getting motivated to do them. And actually, a lot of people with ADHD end up being drawn to careers that have like emergencies, where there's like a lot of like hyper urgency, or even like the news. I know a lot of people with ADHD work in a newsroom because there's a lot of urgency that's happening all the time. And there's a lot of novelty because there's new things every single day or every single hour sometimes. And so those are the four C's. And I kind of went through an overview of them, but I literally use those every day. Whenever I'm couch locked or I'm like running into something and I'm like, oh, I know this is important, but that's not helping me get motivated. How can I get motivated? And I'll go through, okay, captivate, create, compete, complete. How can I make this task more creative? Or how can I make it an interesting challenge? Or how can I involve something that I'm interested in to help me get this task done? So yeah, so those are the 4 C's that really, I feel really unlocked motivation for me in understanding how my brain works.
And I want to go through the motivation strategies that you list throughout the book, but I also want to talk about, recently I came across an interview with Ed Helms, who talks about ADHD. And this is another name that comes up quite a bit, is Edward Hallowell, comes up quite a bit in the ADHD, because I think I actually have Driven to Distraction somewhere, which is the book that he said kind of lit him up. But I want to share something here that I think is really interesting. So Barb's listening to you speak about this stuff and says, hey, maybe I do have ADHD. This all sounds too familiar. So to me, my question is, number one, what led you, and I mean, you go over this in the book, but I mean, the idea of what led you to say, I need to get this figured out. I need to look at this. Maybe I have it. Breaking through maybe some of the stigma that, as you mentioned, was associated with it, like certain things of that nature. But also, as an adult, like it's that whole, and I don't know why this is coming to mind, but it's the Darth Vader. It's too late for me, son. Like it's too late. like I've already navigated people. Like, I mean, again, the idea of, I think Tim brought this up here too. It never occurred to me that ADHD has any relevance to me until I was 56. I mean, that's you're half a century old, right? Like you've navigated a good deal of your life with it. So 2 parts. Number one, what led you to say, I'm going to get this figured out? And then secondly, for those that are having the inklings that Barb's had, or anyone that's listening to this going, maybe I do, but you know what? I've made it this far, et cetera, et cetera. I'd love to hear some thoughts around that.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I'll quickly kind of go through my diagnosis story, like why. So I was in my mid 30s. I think I was 36 when I got diagnosed, and the way it happened, my wife, her friend's husband had been diagnosed, who's actually like a really good friend of mine, but we didn't talk about it all because guys and emotions, were scared to talk about anything apparently. But our wives were talking about it when he got diagnosed. And then my wife came back to me and she was like, hey, so a lot of these things were sounding really familiar. Maybe you should research a little bit. She kind of danced around. She's like, I'm not going to tell you that I think you have this, because like, then you're going to deny it and not be interested or something. But she kind of like said, just like research it, maybe like, I think you should learn it a little bit and understand it better. And like I said before, I was like, I don't have it. I know, because I have no problem focusing on the things I'm interested in, blah, 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 blah. And I also had the very like the 80s and 90s version of ADHD in my head where like, oh, ADHD is that kid running in circles in class that's just like always causing trouble and making a mess and all that stuff. And I was like, I was never that kid running in circles. And so I don't think it doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started reading about it and I was like, oh no, this all makes sense to me. Like at first I read about the hyper focus thing that where you can just get locked in for like 6 hours and you don't even hear your body signals. So like I have no idea that I haven't gone to the bathroom in 6 hours. I haven't eaten food. I haven't had water. And I just sort of like break out of this haze and suddenly I got to like sprint to the bathroom and all that because I'm just like so focused. So that was one of the things that unlocked. Another thing I read just like on a Reddit post or something, several people saying that like itchy t-shirt tags, because sometimes ADHD comes with like sensory issues.
Okay.
And that was like one of the things where I was like, oh no, I tear the tag out of every one of my t-shirts. This is sounding really, really familiar. And then talking about the difficulties with time, with memory, and actually, again, kind of referring back to Dr. William Dodson, this idea of rejection sensitivity, which he's called rejection sensitive dysphoria, where rejection hits people with ADHD really strongly.
Right.
And actually diving into that, I think that really relates with the shame that comes with ADHD. And that's why I think even at 56, 60s, 70s, I still think it's worth looking into it. If you hear something and you're like, oh, this actually sounds like me. Is it too late? Is it worth looking into the ADHD? I think so, because when you grow up with ADHD, there's some estimate that kids with ADHD hear like 10,000 more negative messages than their peers by the age of like 10 or something like that, which is wild. And it's easy to see. Like I heard that stat and I was like, really? And then I'm trying to do the best I can for my kids. Several of my kids or all of my kids have ADHD. And I see it in myself, just like come on, hurry up. We're trying to get out the door, because we're trying to keep on schedules. And it's so hard to like push the kid to do the thing so you can get out the door. So I'm like, oh no, I'm part of the problem. I'm seeing myself giving them the negative message that another kid that doesn't have the difficulties with time, they're not hearing all of that negative reinforcement every day. And so when you hear all that negativity, like especially from all, when I was growing up, I'm hearing it from all the figures I look up to, from my parents who did the best they could, but they didn't know what they were doing. It was the 80s. So they're doing the best they could, but I'm hearing those messages from them. I'm hearing it from teachers. I'm hearing it from people I look up to. Everyone is just sort of seeing like, hey, something's wrong with Jesse. He's failing at all these things. What is the problem? It must just be Jesse. And so I kind of felt like I was just like receiving all this negativity. And I was basically just like I didn't have anywhere else to put it. I didn't have anyone behind me to look at, to blame or anything. And so I was basically just like gathering all these things and kind of throwing it in my like shame backpack and carrying it around with me. And when I got diagnosed at, in my mid 30s, it was suddenly like, oh, there is something that was different that caused all of this stuff that I didn't know about. I just knew I was different, but I didn't have a label to understand why things were different. So I just felt broken. And once I got that label, like some people say like, oh, what does a label matter? Like, oh, labels are really important because knowing that it's a thing and it wasn't just me, but literally millions of people have the same struggles. Now I had a community to kind of like commiserate with and like share like what it's like and have that community and know that I'm not alone, because I think that's a big part of it too. You just feel so alone because it feels like no one else is struggling in the same way. And you just feel like targeted and don't know what to do with it. So I think you said that a two-parter. I think I covered both sides, but I'm all over the place.
Tim brings it up. This diagnosis story sounds familiar. It's incredible when you suddenly get to understand why you've been the way that you are. And You know, I mean, we're seeing, I mean, this is something I'd like to touch on because I don't know what, I mean, someone already in the chat is saying RSD. So I want to know what they mean
Mm.
by RSD. But I've started to know when my RSD is triggered. By the way, Michael also says, he's the one that said good book right out of the gate. It was really helpful. He takes all of his t-shirt tags off. Like none of his t-shirts have tags on it, or maybe he doesn't buy any with tags. But he says he started to figure out when RSD is triggered. He can tell others it will pass, but he's still a mess when it happens. So can you touch on this a little bit? Because I'd love to know more. I know Tim mentions RSD is horrible as well. So I'd like to get a sense of what this is, especially for the listeners that may not be familiar as well.
Yeah, so RSD is rejection sensitive dysphoria. It's the idea proposed by Dr. William Dodson. And it basically is kind of what we were talking about with all the negative messages. What happens for most people with ADHD is we kind of build up this defense mechanism, almost where we're looking for rejection that's coming. And so what happens is, so I'll be in like a somewhat heated discussion with my wife, and then she'll say something, and then something in my brain will trigger and sense that like it basically jumps like 20 minutes down the conversation and sort of thinks like, oh, she said this, that means she thinks this, and then she's going to say this, and then she's going to say that, and then she's going to betray me and like stab me in the back, and like I'm going to feel
it's catastrophizing. You're projecting and catastrophizing at the same time. Wow.
But the weird thing about it is I'm not thinking all those things. Like that's kind of what's happening in my brain, but my brain just jumps to the thing already happened. So it feels like the thing that she just said was that 20 minutes later, really, really in it. I just feel like deep betrayal. So it's a little bit different for different people. Sometimes they feel a withdrawing of love or withdrawing of respect. For me, it feels like betrayal. Like somebody just like really betrayed me deeply to the point where, and some people will shut down when that RSD hits. Me, I blow up because like that was kind of growing up in my family response. That's how I think I heard you on a previous podcast talking about how your family got really loud, and that was okay. Yep. That was kind of my family too. And that was very much not my wife's family. But yeah, so I would get really big, really loud when that RSD hits, when I feel that betrayal. And for other people, it feels like, what in the world? Jesse just like blew up out of nowhere. But for me, like in the moment, even when I can kind of logically see that, oh, this isn't what they actually said, in the moment, it does not. It's kind of, all our emotions are sort of like reading the signals that our body is doing. And my body's still doing all those things. So I can't just say like, oh no, this isn't betrayal. I feel it's almost like
it's
pain.
Visceral. It's visceral.
Yeah, visceral. That's a really great word for it. It's so intense. And so actually once I learned about RSD and I was trying to like, well, how do I fix this? Because this is, a recurring problem, not a lot, but when it would happen in my marriage and like this guy, it would be a really big deal and we'd have to recover from it. And like, there's kind of this thing where people, if you're familiar with the RSD, you'll have an RSD like response, and then you have to go pick up the pieces because you probably damaged your relationship, said something you didn't mean to say, all those sort of things. And so I didn't want that to happen anymore. So I was trying to stay aware of when that was going to happen. And so one thing that really helped, I had an RSD moment, and there's like kind of a confluence of different strategies that I all used at once that worked. One was when I felt that betrayal, I was like, again with the labels, I was like, oh, this is that RSD. This is that RSD thing. This isn't real. I feels real. I feel all the intensity in my body, and none of that is going away with me feeling that, like me recognizing I think this is that thing. But I was able to basically, I put my hand up over my mouth, which kind of gave me a moment to pause of like not just immediately saying what I was feeling. So putting my hand over my mouth, and then after that, I kind of like had a second to think about it so my brain could catch up. And then basically through gritted teeth, luckily my wife and I had like just recently watched a video or something on RSD, so she was familiar with the term as well. I was able to say, I think I'm feeling the RSD right now. Can we take a break and talk again in like half an hour or something like that?
Sounds like a bad
and it was
like a bad trip. Like nothing is real.
Yeah, it's so wild.
Wow.
And it was really hard to do in the moment, but I was able to say that out, and then we got a break. And then I was able to basically let my kind of intellectual or logical part of my brain catch up and evaluate. And one thing I was able to do is something that therapists had told me, where basically evaluate your history with this person and think, does it make sense? Like, does it make sense that you've been betrayed this deep way from this person who you love, who you've done all these things, you've had this history with? And
Slowing
that
down.
when my logical, yeah, when
Yeah,
my logical part of my brain was able to catch up and evaluate it, it was like, oh, it doesn't make sense. Like, it just doesn't make any sense that my wife would decide right now in this situation to deeply betray me in the way that I felt. And so once I think my logical brain was kind of able to catch up and evaluate the situation, that intensity in my chest faded really quickly. Because it was like, oh, this isn't real. I've made up a scenario where I think I've been deeply betrayed or rejected or whatever it is. And I was able to stop it from happening. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen again. Like, it's happened
sure.
since then, but I'm able to recognize it sooner and faster and stop it to where, like, I know that if I'm feeling it and I continue a conversation, it's going to end badly. It's just not going to go well. So I just need to do whatever I can to stop the conversation, because even if that's going to be rude, it's going to be less of a problem than if I try to just like ride through the RSD episode or whatever you want to call it.
Barb just posted this in the chat. Wow, this is a new level for me. It can explain a lot. Been going down a rabbit hole on this for too long. So that was really, really great. What I wonder if, and maybe you can, before we get into the motivation tactics, to me, I almost wonder if, so you say it blows up, you can get really agitated, you can say the wrong things. Can some people withdraw? Like,
Yeah.
Because to me, that's the opposite of it, but it's still just as detrimental, right?
Yeah, so that is totally the case, where some people, instead of getting big and loud like I do, they will completely just shut down. And then what happens is they shut down and then they sort of harbor those feelings and they get hard. And then the next time they're holding on to that previous thing and thinking that was true. And so it just gets kind of worse and worse. So yeah, I don't actually know if it's a complete correlation with because there's like fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I think there might be a fifth one
Right.
now.
I can't remember. So these are all kind of, yeah, because it's primitive, it's primal.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know for sure, but I believe there's a correlation there. It's that same sort of kind of primal response because it feels like danger, like that, like the idea of like withdrawing love or like betrayal, that feels like at a more primitive level, that's like a danger zone. And that's why you respond big, because that's dangerous to have that sort of thing withdrawn. And so I think that again, I don't want to say because I don't know for sure, but I believe that is sort of like a direct connection with that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response.
Jesse, this has been great. We're going to keep going. I want to dive into some, because when you look at the book, there's motivation, time, memory, and emotion. But motivation gets a lot of play in your book. And I think that you mentioned off the top the idea of urgency being such a driver, right? Rather than importance, because an interest plays a role. But you've got at least what it looks like. Is there a dozen here? At least motivation strategy
Something like
guides.
that, yeah.
And my first one off the top, by the way, which I love, is adding action verbs to task. I talk about this a lot, right? Especially with time crafting, where if you, number one, the easiest thing you can do to your to-do list is verb it, like activate it, like put something in front of it, give your brain. Again, this goes to in conjunction with what I said earlier about whether you have ADHD or not. Adding a verb to your to-do list as your task, like it gives your brain a break. And all of these seem to be giving your brain a bit of a break to a degree in different ways. Which strategy of the ones that you list here do you see yourself going to more than, say, some of the others?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, I will say, yeah, the add action verbs to a task is so good. And if people don't know what it is, the idea is if you have a task that just says like taxes, that's not an action verb. What does that mean? And a lot of times by requiring yourself, like, oh, you need to add an action word to the front, and it can't be a generic one that like just do. That's not do
work
taxes.
Work on.
Right. And so a lot of times what happens when you try to add a word to it, it's like, oh, well, if I can't just say do taxes, what is it? You realize, oh, actually, this is several tasks. This isn't one task. Like I have to gather the paperwork. I have to find the W-2 form. I have to log into the website. There's all these other action verbs that are actually part of this project. So taxes isn't a task, it's a project, and there's a lot of little action verbs with it. And so that's a really consistent one that's really good because you don't realize that one little line is actually a whole thing, and which can actually be good because some of those might be easy, like, oh, gather the paperwork. I can check that off quickly because I already know where it is.
Or you can batch them, right? Like, oh, I need to gather. Oh, let's just do some gathering.
Yeah, totally. So I've got my book here right now, so I'm kind of like looking through some of the ones here.
Through, yep.
Yeah. So one I love is, so there's kind of the myth in productivity world with like the idea of eating the frog first. And if you haven't heard this before, the idea is like, oh, you've got a really big, scary task that you don't want to do, like eating a frog. Like you don't want to eat the frog.
Brian Tracy talked about it. Yeah, we'll link back to that episode in the show notes because Brian Tracy's been on the show and he's popularized that for sure.
Oh, nice. So so that does not work for people with ADHD. So the idea being that you eat the frog first and then everything else becomes easier because you've gotten through that big task. But for me, if I sit down at the start of the day and I put the frog in front of me and like that's my task for the day, at the end of the day, I'm just going to be staring at that frog and have gotten nothing else done. Mm-hmm. I really need to do the opposite. And basically, I call it eating the ice cream first. It's kind of the couch lock where I need to get myself in motion because of inertia. If I'm not moving, it's really hard to get me moving. Mm-hmm. And so I need to find things that are fun or exciting for my brain or that match the 4 C's, the captivate, create, compete, complete, because that gets me into motion. And once I'm moving, then I have some momentum and it becomes much easier to take on those more difficult tasks like eating the frog, because then I'm moving and I feel like, oh, I'm getting this done. Yeah, I'll take on that big thing. And it becomes a lot easier to just sort of like, I use the metaphor of the train, which I've probably said a few times, like now I'm flying down the track. It becomes a lot easier to just like crash through like that thing and get it done.
It's similar to night owls.
A really big one.
Similar to night owls. Like, I mean, if you try to do the hard thing first thing in the morning, it ain't
right.
happening. It ain't happening. So you have to either do those two combined, actually, the idea of adding action verbs, because you can make things small enough that you can get little hits of dopamine, just little bits that build up, of course. Like, well, I'm a Green Lantern fan. You're adding a little bit here, a little bit there, so that when you need that big punch of will, you've got it, right? Like you've built up some dopamine that you can then use, but also you're doing a thing that really, but by the time you're at your prime, you can hit those harder or more challenging tasks with greater quality of effort, attention, all of those things that we can kind of
yeah.
Tim just shared this. How is Jesse able to see inside my brain?
Nice.
Yes, and there is research, and Tim also brings this up. There is research linking ADHD to night owlishness. There is that as well. So you're not a night owl though, are you?
Oh, I definitely am a night owl. Yes, 100%. So there's actually something often referred to called delayed sleep phase syndrome.
Yeah, and they call it, and they've coined, so that's the official phrase, but you hear it in blog posts like bedtime revenge procrastination. You hear that too,
right?
Which is like which makes you feel bad about it, right? But go ahead.
Yeah. So delayed sleep phase syndrome, it's actually extremely prevalent with people with ADHD. Like I think I read somewhere there was like a study that said it was like more than 80% of people with ADHD have delayed sleep phase syndrome, which is the idea where basically your sleep phase is shifted backward or like later in the day. And so that I've always struggled with that. I go to bed at like 2 a.m, like, and that's good. Sometimes it'll be 3, sometimes 4. Like it's really late. Even if I have a job where I have to get up at 7, I just can't. If I go to bed earlier, I'll just lie in bed staring at the ceiling for like 5 hours and not be able to get it done. So yeah, it's brutal, and it's really, really common for people with ADHD. I'm trying to remember what drew this. I'm trying to remember. I was like, why did this come up? The delayed sleep phase thing.
Well, because we were talking about like the idea of eating the ice cream versus eating the frog, and as a night owl, right? And so we're seeing like things like, again, in the comments, we interviewed Dr. Michael Bruce not too long before this. So Jackie's mentioning the idea of a dolphin in The Power of When, right? So if you've not read that book, or if you have not listened to that podcast episode I've done, we'll link to that in the show notes as well. But it's actually quite interesting when you think about it. And what I have to say, Jesse, before we wrap up, because I want to be conscientious of time, is I've never seriously, and I've read Faster Than Normal by Peter Shankman. I've read a lot of stuff around ADHD. And through this conversation, which I'm seeing a lot of chats as well about this, I've never had that test officially done. I think I'm going to do it. I think there's enough there.
Let's do it.
I think there's enough there. Now, I mean, again, in Canada, how you get it, and there's a different, because I know that I think my nephew has it, and it's not something that you can just go to go and get done. You have to get a referral and all that stuff. But I'm going to look into it because there are elements there. And I can tell you that time crafting, which is the framework I teach, definitely has ways to point your attention towards things. And I've navigated my life and my work that way. And I'm like, I wonder if that is a quote coping mechanism. And I know it could very well be that. I mean, the activating your to-do list is something I talk about all the time. Theming your time, giving space and time for these certain kind of things to take hold. Again, it's about harnessing your attention. So I'm curious. I wouldn't be a surprise, but I think having these conversations is important. And Tim brought it up earlier. Where is it here? I'm going to find this. Here we go. I think it's important for people to talk about all of this, the reality of the lived experience, because I think a lot of people are struggling with this without realizing, or worse, just setting aside,
Right.
And we live in this Western culture where go, fast, now is the order of the day. But everything we've talked about requires clarity, right? Requires a slowing down. You talked about some of these tactics and tools. And that's not something that, the world is, quote, like being a night owl, is designed for us to do. It wants us to keep moving forward, get this done, check off all these boxes. And it's got to be, that navigating of the world as such has to be challenging for people with ADHD overall, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think all the stuff you're saying is so true. I do want to say, like, for anyone that maybe like you, that's interested in looking into it more, a lot of times I point people to it's called the I can't remember. It's the ADHD self-report scale. And it's a little bit out of date. It's like based on an older version of the DSM, which is the Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders. But I find that to be a really quick way to have an idea of, like, am I close? Am I kind of on the line? Should I pursue this? Or am I going to, like, score zeros and, like, this isn't me at all? And so that's one place that I would point people to, just as sort of like a quick way to have an idea. Like, this is some of the things that I'm saying are maybe sounding familiar. Look up the ADHD self-report scale to give you sort of an inkling of whether you want to pursue it further. Because unfortunately, like you said, actually getting a diagnosis it's a mess. It's different everywhere. Like, I'm in the US, and it's like different every county. Like, who knows how that process is. And I will say the value of getting an official diagnosis, like, there is medication, and that can be incredibly helpful for a lot of people. Like, it's probably the number one thing that you can do to treat it. But personally, I'm not on medication currently, and I still think it's worth getting the diagnosis, even if you're not interested in pursuing the medication. Mostly just because it's so easy to be like, oh, I have this thing, believe it. And then, like, 2 weeks later, because you have ADHD, because you have this shame backpack, you're like, actually, no, I'm probably just lazy and a jerk and all of these things. It's so easy to pull back and tell yourself that negative story. And so it's really helpful to have that official, like, somebody that really knows this disorder or whatever you call it, said that I have it too. And for me personally, I've actually been diagnosed 3 times, because I had my initial diagnosis. And then I, basically people that were possibly going to affiliate with, I went through their diagnostic process so that I would know what it was like before recommending it to people. And each time I did it, I was like, are they going to find out that I actually don't have ADHD? And what am I going to do if that happens? Oh no, because it's so easy to just say, like, I'm probably just lazy. I'm probably just a jerk, or whatever it is. Yeah, so I still think even if you have no interest in the medication, it's worth pursuing that if you think this might be something you have. And also reach out to me. I'm happy to have that conversation as well.
The book is called Extra Focus, the quick start guide to adult ADHD. Jesse, thanks so much for taking the time to be here today. Where can people pick up the book and keep up with the work that you're doing?
Yeah, so the book's called Extra Focus. Like you said, you can get it. I have the website extrafocusbook.com, and that links to everywhere the book's available, Amazon, your local bookstore. You can even recommend it and they'll ship it to you, or they can order it and bring it in. And I also do a weekly newsletter about ADHD, which is also called Extra Focus. So that's just extrafocus.com. That will let you sign up for that. And you can also, when you sign up for the newsletter, you do get a free ADHD strategy guide, which can, again, sort of help. If you're curious, that might be a good way to look in a little bit further to understand how this crazy brain of ours works.
Jesse, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
I loved it. This is amazing. Thanks a lot.
All right, everybody. That's it for the episode. Jesse, thanks so much for this. We had a lot of great 104 comments in the YouTube.
Woo, very nice.
Lots of vibrant
I just copied and pasted them. So if this loses, I can go look them all up later and see what I missed. I was so tempted.
Yeah.
So tempted. That little red dot was just like calling my name throughout, but I knew the second I opened it, it was going to be all over.
Yeah. So Tim mentions the Harvard test, the Harvard, the Harvard diagnostic tool. He says it's useful and says it's the main thing well, here it is. I'll add it to the broadcast. He says it's essentially the main initial screening tool used in the UK. So,
nice. Harvard. I'm not even actually
the Harvard diagnostic tool is so. There you go. You got a shiny new object to go pursue, Jesse.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking up. It looks like it's the same one. It's the self-report scale I mentioned that's coming up for Harvard. So and ASRS is what it's called.
Gotcha. And Janet and Sarah brought up some interesting stuff, which I mean, I don't know enough about, but Janet brought this up, which I think is, we couldn't fit all this in the podcast, but menopause really kicking ADHD into high gear.
That's something I have been meaning to kind of research more because I'm not familiar with that stuff, but I keep hearing those sort of things. So that's definitely something I'm hearing as well. And perimenopause as well as being a big, strong factor. And sometimes, what I miss, like kicking it in a high gear or something like that.
Kick the ADHD into high gear. Like basically.
Yes, that's definitely kind of what I've heard as well.
Yeah. So, and Sarah mentioned it as well. She said, I experienced both about the same time. I had not thought about menopause as a possibility. So it's entirely possible that those two things working together. Oh man, what a cocktail that would be. Holy smokes.
Right.
So Jesse, this episode will go live a little later this year in terms of the audio version of it, but the live stream, as anyone who's watching we're going to probably release this a little bit sooner than that. So yeah, it's been great to finally have you on the show and connect. So we'll wrap up the live stream. Jesse, stick around for a second, and
awesome.
we'll keep you in the green room.
Thanks everyone for hanging out. This has been awesome. I'm excited to read everyone's comments that I didn't get to read during the chat.
Awesome. And I'll see for those. I'll just be a couple of minutes, and then for those that are still watching live that are members of the Time Crafting Trust Premium community, I'll see you in the Focus Fix section next. If you are on the live stream and you're not a premium member, we'll link to that in the notes here, so that way you can join as a member. All right. We'll see you later. Thanks for joining us on the live stream, everybody.